right, what's up, y'all? Happy Sunday night. Welcome back to Refounding Fathers. I'm your host, Wes Seiler, the conservative representation on the show, and I am thrilled to offer Chris Souza another chance to be able to defend his liberal progressiveness on our channel. So welcome back, Chris. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you. Good to see you guys. I am happy to announce that we found out the sex of our baby on Friday,
Yeah,
and we are having a son.
that's awesome. Hey, congratulations. Let me see
As
that.
good,
Congratulations, bud.
as good liberal feminists,
There's your sitcom applause right there, buddy. But no, we are happy for you. That's awesome.
as good liberal feminists, we are of course worried, but we will try not to allow him to, embody like toxic masculinity and all those other buzzwords. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, good for you, man. That's exciting.
I'm saying this just to troll you specifically, Kyle.
And I know, Kyle, you're
Perfect.
just waiting with so many comments there. So, Kyle, my libertarian buddy, welcome to the show as well. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. No, absolutely. No, listen, truthfully, very happy for you, Chris, and for your wife. And hope you raise a good man who, embodies good values like you do. So
Yeah.
proud
Thank
to be happy with you.
It really is, man. It is life changing, and I would tell you, even as a conservative, as someone who's very much a traditionalist in many ways, I would tell you that having a kid was one of the first times that I realized like tradition is helpful, but there's a point at which there's uncharted territory, and I never would have expected it when it came to having kids. And I'll tell you a quick story: is I took my mom down from the delivery room after we had our kid, and all that kind of stuff. And, we'd actually, one of the delivery room, we had been there for a couple of days at that point. We had my daughter. And I took my mom downstairs from the hospital, and I was like, okay, we need to set up our car seat. And she was just like, yeah, okay, tell me how. And I was like, I thought you were going to tell me how. And I had the box right there. She was like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, how did you get me home? She's just like, I mean, it just kind of, that's what we
Bro,
did.
they've changed a lot.
Late
They've changed a
80s,
lot.
right?
What you got to do is you got to call the fire department. The fire department will help you out.
Yeah.
I've heard that. We were looking at strollers and car seat bases yesterday, and we were trying to fold like the model strollers, and we couldn't unfold them, and we had to get help. But they were super knowledgeable and helped us out a lot and helped us pick some out. So that was nice.
There is so much to learn, like when you're becoming a parent. It really is like, the books and all that stuff is like helpful, but like every time you think you got something figured out, there's something new, that you're like, wait, what is that? RSV this, and like, this requirement, that, and I got to sign it. There's so many things when it comes to like having a kid. And it's kind of like going down, like if you've ever been whitewater rafting, like just going down a river. You just hold on and like try to see where you're going, and then you paddle like and try to survive. Yeah. Like that's pretty much been my experience with fatherhood. But it is a ton of fun. It is a ton of fun, and it's a new day when it comes to parenting because I mean, my wife and I, but we both work full time, so that whole traditional role of someone at home to be able to watch the kid, like. Who's gonna do that? Especially when they get sick or you don't have childcare available for whatever reason. There's a lot in today's society that's shifting, and kids are right there in the middle. So
I know you're not a religious person, per se, Chris, but let me exhort you to read the book of Proverbs. That was a book written from a father to a son. There's so much wisdom in there, and not just like biblical, orthodox, like Christian wisdom, and it's just earthly, good old fashioned father to son wisdom. So let me commend you to read that.
Yeah. And then once your kid like acts up, I mean, I pick mine up and I like throw mine onto my bed, and they like love to like bounce and go flying. So there's that. I don't know if that's in Proverbs, but hey, that's how I do it. So
that works.
I'll have to show you this. I don't have a picture of it, but maybe next episode. I got a Father's Day card, and on it, my daughter said, "Happy Father's Day, love you, bruh." Like, so you're gonna get stuff like that. Like,
kids got no respect. No respect.
She's 5. We're already on a bro relationship apparently. So there's a lot of fun with it, man. A lot of fun days coming your way. So we got an awesome show tonight. We got a lot of stuff to get into. We're gonna bring back our media moment. That's coming.
Media moment.
There we go. So this is our chance to be able to talk about culture and what's going on, especially when it comes to either movies or music or in this case, we've got a story that's going on with a band. And honestly, this is a band that I have really loved. I've listened to a lot of their music. I've learned to play a couple of their songs, and Kyle, I'm sure you can too with all your talent there with guitar and everything else. But Winston Marshall from Mumford and Sons is in the news right now and is leaving the band. And I think, Kyle, you have a little bit more for this story if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So some context here. Yeah, so Marshall is the banjo player for the band Mumford and Sons, and I guess it was last March or so. He was tweeting a book. Congratulations to an author of a book that he recently read, as he had done for years. Reads a book and then kind of comments to the author on Twitter, and had read a book. I believe it's called Unmasked by a right-wing author named Andy Ngo, or NGO, I guess it's No and Yo, something along those lines. And Ngo, of course, is a partisan right-wing commentator. Specifically, his work has condemned Antifa and has been definitely focused on that. And of course, they've actually put him in the hospital several times. And so I mean, I think adequately covering the violent left pretty accurately. So anyway, he just tweets out to Ngo, congratulations on the book. It's an important work. You're brave for writing it. That's basically all it was. He didn't, say this book was amazing, the left is terrible. Just said, hey, congratulations on the book. This is important. You're a brave person. And of course, Twitter had a collective meltdown, and they've been having a meltdown for an entire year, to the point where they threatened every member of the band Mumford & Sons and their families. And actually, the singer Marcus Mumford comes from a pretty high-profile family in Britain. But death threats to all their families, and the left just keeps going after them and going after them and going after them, to the point where Marshall actually came out this week and said that he was just going to take a leave out. He's quitting the band. He's leaving the band. And I actually really enjoyed his words. He actually wrote an article himself, kind of a statement, in which he actually quotes Solzhenitsyn several times. So I got to give him props for that. But in his statement, he basically says, I could continue to remain in the band, in Mumford & Sons, but I would have to continue to self-censor, and that is a violation of my integrity. Something along those lines. And
crazy.
Very important and profound truth that he gets on.
Yeah. So you got a comment here from Greg Saunders, who says Kyle's beyond talented, which is great. Apparently there's an opening in Mumford & Sons, so maybe you can fill that. The band will be okay with you in it. But, what a tragedy. And I pulled a headline. This is from Slate.com. To your point, Kyle, and that was a great summary that you just gave. But, look at this. This is from Slate. Antifa defeats Mumford & Sons. This is not, satire of the situation. This is, actual coverage of it. Since when is a band something to be defeated? Maybe if we're talking battle of the bands and who's going to be have the best I don't know, acoustic player or drummer or whatever, but this is talking about them in a political context as if they were running for election or I don't know, a freaking war. How do we get to this point where if someone has a political opinion that we don't like, that we're going to, like you said, Kyle, threaten their family? This is absurd to me. So, Chris, help me understand. What are we missing? Is there anything that we're missing in this story or context?
Well, I think only to the extent of how bad Andy Ngo himself is. But regardless of that, there's two people and two groups here that we kind of have to evaluate the merits of in order to fully analyze the story. You have to look at this guy from Mumford & Sons. You have to look at Andy Ngo. You have to look at Antifa. And then you have to look at the group of people that was harassing him and his family and sending death threats, which is never acceptable. I do think that this artist deserves some criticism for praising Andy Ngo. And I say that because, one of his most interesting lines, I thought, in the article that he wrote about why he was leaving Mumford & Sons was he said, endorsing a book about the excesses of the far left does not necessarily mean endorsing the far right. But Andy Ngo is far right. So theoretically that is true. In this case, I don't think it necessarily was. Andy Ngo, yes, does post a lot about the excesses of Antifa. He has documented real violence from them. He's also exaggerated a lot, and he's also pretty openly taken the side of the white nationalist groups that Antifa often comes into conflict with. to the point where he has doxed people online critical of these white nationalist groups like the Proud Boys, which has led to them being harassed and them being attacked. And one person was even, if I have my story straight, killed by a member of one of these white nationalist groups after being doxed by Andy Ngo. Now, I highly doubt that this guy from Mumford and Sons, I keep referring to him that way because I cannot remember his name. I highly doubt he knew all that, which is why the response should have been to try and educate him, to try and say, Winston Marshall, thank you, to try and say, hey, Winston Marshall, maybe you don't know this, but this is who Andy Ngo really is. Yes, Antifa is bad, but also this guy's kind of bad too. But, obviously we do not live in a time where people react to things proportionally, where people think that criticism can be done without trying to absolutely destroy someone. And that is a shame. I don't think that he should have felt the need to quit this band. But it is unfortunate if he felt driven out due to the actions of just, extremists on any side.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is the problem here. I mean, it's just like Gina Carano, right? As we get to a point where this person, like, it's okay to have a mistaken political opinion, if it even is mistaken, right? Like, we deal with it all the time. I mean, I love the Bourne movies, Bourne Supremacy, Bourne Identity, all that stuff. Matt Damon is a pretty far left guy. I mean, just listen to him talk personally. I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
still act exceptionally well. And last I checked, Winston can play in the band exceptionally well. Hence their like tours and albums and all this stuff. What a tragedy and a shame when art succumbs to politics like this.
Exactly right. And he didn't endorse Alex Jones or Donald Trump, but honestly, it would have been fine if he did. People are allowed to have opinions. Wasn't like the whole rock and roll predicated on being individualist and going against what's mainstream in culture? Isn't that what rock and roll is predicated on? And now you have to go with the crowd to be in rock and roll, and you have to do this. But if we could just touch on his quote again, I really love that. He said, "I could remain in the band, but to do that would to violate my integrity or to make me go against my integrity." And honestly, the more that I've read about totalitarian groups, the goal of totalitarian groups of both the right and the left is fear. It's to make you be afraid to express your own political belief. It's to make you afraid to express your identity and your opinion and succumb and conform to the party line or the narrative. The fascists did it in Germany. The communists did it all in the USSR. And it's exactly what the violent left is doing now as well. You have to believe exactly what they want you to believe. And if you don't, then you're going to have to question everything about yourself. And ultimately, when you do that, you make yourself a liar, which is a much deeper issue.
Well, in fairness to Chris, like, and liberals, like, they're not the only ones doing this, right?
That's right.
Like,
Yeah,
I can't stand it in conservative circles now is the minute that you have a different opinion about anything, then you're a rhino, right? Like, that's the go-to term. It's like, oh, you're a rhino on this. Like, if you, if you're against Russia, you're a rhino because Trump loves Russia, even though it's been the conservative platform for years, going back to Reagan and before, that were hardliners against Russia. Like, I'm sorry, if you haven't kept up, then, like, you're gone, right? Like, we have to get to a point where we allow some diversity of opinion, and that be okay, and not run people off because, they get to that point where they disagree with us, even if that means that they're mistaken. And so I feel like the fabric of reasonable and rational discourse is breaking down across groups, but this is a very clear example of that. So I'm grateful for our show, for what we do, because you guys help keep me sane, because we can have that rational discourse, and we've had that for the past, what has it been, 3 weeks as we've gone through the Second Amendment, and I'm looking forward to wrapping that one up, because not only can we talk about different authors and things like that we disagree with, we can actually go towards these much tougher topics like this and still prove that discourse can happen even if we disagree. And I appreciated watching Chris go through this and doing your quiz game there. I'll never forget that image of you as a Boondock Saint there. But I wanted to give Kyle a couple minutes here because he did a whole lot of work to be able to put that quiz together. And Chris, you did very well in it, so I got to compliment you on that. But it was obvious to me that there was like some underlying points and things like that you wanted to bring out. I mean, we talked about ATF gun classifications and the ridiculousness. You see that on the chart here that is trying to define what is and is not an assault rifle. And then, of course, you got into a couple of the statistics there, and you can see I pulled one of your slides, Kyle, talking about gun suicides versus gun deaths,
Yeah.
yourself versus actual, armed robbery, that type of thing. So, what do we leave with in this sense of talking about the Second Amendment, and what points? What did we learn? What did you want us to learn through that? And I'm curious, if Chris agrees with those lessons.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things I really wanted to kind of hit through, and a lot of them were just debunking, popular, opinions or terminology, things that specifically the gun control crowd brings up. Things like all semi-automatics, all AR-15s, things like that. Things that people, sound scary, but don't honestly have a clue about what they actually mean. And we didn't even get into a lot of those other things that I was hoping to get into, like how you can purchase a firearm. Like you can't, despite what Hollywood tells you, despite what mainstream news tells you, you cannot go online, buy a gun, and have it sent to your house. You can't do that. That's against the law. It does not work like that. It's shipped to a dealer. You have to do a background check. So that was really the purpose, was to kind of get behind some of those, some of the misinformation that is constantly being spread. Actually, Biden this week had a forum on gun control, gave a whole speech, and I didn't get to watch all of it, but the parts that I read were just flat out wrong. He was either being intentionally dishonest, or he just doesn't know what he's talking about. And honestly, it could be either one at this point. For example, he said,
fire two blasts, Kyle. Just fire two blasts. Like, that's all you need.
Yeah, exactly. Fire one in the air. Yeah, all you need is a double barrel shotgun. This is the worst advice, honestly, that you could ever give.
Was he the one that said a few years ago that officers should shoot people in the leg instead of?
Yeah, it's also so stupid.
That's pretty bad.
It's unbelievably stupid. Unbelievably stupid. But even this week, even when you talk about on the more philosophical side of things, where he says when the Second Amendment was written, you couldn't buy a cannon. That's untrue. That is verifiably, objectively, provably untrue. Not only could you buy cannons, you could buy grenades, you could buy warships. You could have actual warships as private citizens. And the government was fine with that. In fact, one of the Massachusetts colonies had a law that said you could have cannons, you could have all these things, of course, but you couldn't keep your artillery pieces loaded within town limits. And if you broke that rule, you know what they did, what the penalty for breaking that rule was? They were to sell your cannons and your grenades and artillery pieces at public auction. They didn't seize them for themselves. They didn't seize them for the local military or police outfit. They sold them back to the public. So these are some things that, like, the gun control crowd is just, again, either lying objectively about or it just doesn't know what they're talking about. So some of those things were kind of the point that we were trying to get behind there.
Yeah. Any response, Chris, on that?
Yeah, I think...
I have a lot of thoughts, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think one advantage of making these kind of Byzantine and comical regulations about what kinds of guns and gun accessories can be, sold is that they're rules that apply to everyone. Whereas the more effective way of handling gun control would probably be dealing with not so much what kind of guns can people own, but who can own guns. And then that runs into a lot more constitutional problems and a lot more problems with systemic discrimination in our justice system. Government, a lot of gun control policies started as the result of the government's response to the Black Panthers and other, groups of people of color that were asserting their right to bear arms. We talk a lot.
In my state, those Jim Crow laws around guns still exist, by the way. Go ahead.
We talk a lot on the left about, the mentally ill and keeping guns out of their hands. But what does that mean exactly? Does that mean someone who is not exactly neurotypical does not have the same right to bear arms as others? Now, I do still believe that guns are dangerous, and there are things that we need to do to ensure that not every single individual in America is carrying a gun or owning a gun. I favor universal background checks. As Kyle said, background checks are a little bit more common than most people think. But most Americans also think, including gun-owning Americans, that they should be more common. But it is a complex issue, and I think those complexities are often overlooked on both the right and the left when the left takes on this kind of extreme anti-gun stance, and I do include Biden in that. where there are some gun control measures of Biden's that I do support, and some that I think go way too far, run into constitutional issues, and could also be subject to systemic abuse of minorities and people with mental illnesses all over this country, as all laws in our country kind of are.
The big thing for me, Chris, is I think about, you brought up the Constitution, and I think about the Second Amendment a lot. And I think about how, the Second Amendment was designed to give the people the ability to defend themselves, to form militias and all that, to preserve the state. And I do think it's important to be able to retain those rights. But I also think we have to look, this is more for conservatives, but we have to look at what are the tools of tyranny today, right? What are the actual threats? And I'm not particularly worried about the government showing up and seizing my property to the point that I have to defend it with a firearm, although I own them. What I think about today is like the cyber threats, the intrusion into our lives, and not just from government, but from business too. Is like sometimes it feels like the same people who will defend themselves with guns are also just like giving away their privacy and their data and everything else and their personal information, on like Facebook or something, like answering a quiz, and then it's just like out there. And I feel like as conservatives, if we believe in personal responsibility, we believe in defending oneself, and we believe that there is a threat from an overarching government, then we've also got to like educate ourselves on the tools today, because there's this whole line of theory in conservatism that I feel like it has largely been lost, unfortunately. It talks about soft despotism. It talks about the nature of dictatorship to creep into your lives. And maybe I think that's what we can get into next is let's talk about Ed Snowden. Let's talk about what he unveiled that the government was doing. And maybe I think Kyle and I will have a lot of agreement actually on this, is you look at some of those programs that were going around and like they were absolutely just farming our data, using it and mining through it and all these things. And by the way, they weren't using guns to do that. And so, in that respect, guns are important. But I got to be honest, guys. I set up a security system at my house. I have like one of the most advanced ADT systems, not because like I feel uncomfortable with a gun. I feel very comfortable, but because I know there's more than just that going on. There's more threats.
I agree with you. The argument that the Second Amendment today is necessary in order to help us defend ourselves against a tyrannical government, I agree, is not the strongest argument. If you're looking at it through a modern lens, Biden had a line at his speech this week that angered a lot of people where he said, if you want to fight the US government, you need nukes. And so I think personally that the stronger argument for the Second Amendment is just self-defense. I think people have a right to self-defense, and owning a gun is a part of that.
Including in the digital.
Sure. Yeah. So, right. Of course. Right. So natural rights, the right to life, liberty, property. Life is chief among those. Right. So, of course, it's a right to defend yourself. That includes the right to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. But to say you have to have F-15s and nukes to fight the U.S. government, that ain't true. Go to Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, South Korea or North Korea. I mean, any place where the U.S. has tried to fight a war in the last 50 years, and those people didn't have nukes or,
that's going to be the theme, right?
It's insane. It's insane to think.
That has different advantages and disadvantages than a civil war would have, though.
Right. And I think that's going to be the line of the thing that connects, our next, I don't know, year, 2-3 years of topics, is we can find a Biden misquote or ridiculous interpretation of reality with each one. So that'll be fun. All right. But thank you guys so much for being on the show. Chris, again, so happy to hear about, your son and wish you the best as you go through these next stages of pregnancy and everything. And Kyle, thank you for all the work you did on our Second Amendment quiz. That was a ton of fun. So we'll be seeing you guys next week. Give us about 5 minutes here. We're going to reset our show here for Conservatism on Tap. Here in about 5 minutes, we'll load that up, and we've got a full slate of topics for that one as well. So thank you all for watching. And we will see you next week for another episode